Gaming Bolt presents 15 things you need to know before you buy Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee might not be the traditional mainline Switch Pokémon RPGs that we've all been waiting for. That comes next year. But in spite of all the changes it's making, it's looking at the very least like a decent stopgap until Generation 8 finally arrives. Sure, there's some cause for concern, and many of the decisions being taken by Game Freak here simply won't sit well with veteran fans of the series. But being able to see Kanto recreated in proper 3D is still an exciting prospect. In this feature, we're going to take a look at 15 major talking points from Pokémon Let's Go. Without further ado, let's begin. Intended for even younger audiences. We know what you're thinking. It's not like Pokémon is ever not intended for younger audiences. That it's meant to be a kid-friendly experience is the core premise of the entire series. But Pokémon games always have great depth and mechanics that inform the experience in more ways than they seem to at first glance. You can still play and enjoy a Pokémon game without ever having to dig too deep into these mechanics, but for those who wish to go all in, they have that option. Pokémon Let's Go, however, is removing most of these mechanics and aiming to be an even more accessible pick-up-and-play experience. So for the next few points, we're going to be talking about some of the most major things that are being removed to that end. Revamped wild encounters. This is the big one, of course. Gotta catch 'em all is the war cry of all Pokémon fans, and that's still the central premise in Let's Go. But catching all the critters in Kanto is going to be a very different experience. Inspired by Pokémon Go's take on the formula, Let's Go is going to ditch wild battles entirely. That happens in two major ways. First off, there's no more random encounters. All wild Pokémon will appear in the Overworld, which means that you can see exactly what kinds of Pokémon there are in an area around you. And also that you won't be barraged by endless hordes of Zubats every freaking time you go to Mount Moon. Catching Pokémon. The second way Pokémon Let's Go is changing wild Pokémon encounters is that you no longer battle Pokémon. After you initiate an encounter with a wild Pokémon, you no longer throw out your own Pokémon to whittle down their HP to a level where they're weak enough to be caught. Instead, the game uses the system used in Pokémon Go, where you have the option to either throw berries at Pokémon or throw Pokéballs at them. Throwing Pokéballs can be done through buttons, of course, but it can also be done by motion controls, mimicking how the same was done by flicking the touchscreen in Pokémon Go. If you want the feeling of being a real trainer throwing Pokéballs, there's going to be a Pokéball controller that you can purchase too. If you're not too keen on spending extra money, you can just use your Joy-Cons. Also, as far as the legendaries are concerned, this doesn't really apply. Those wild Pokémon you will still battle. Gym restrictions. In an effort to make Pokémon more accessible and even more kid-friendly, Let's Go is changing how it approaches gyms as well. Essentially, each gym now has certain requirements that you have to meet, such as being at a certain minimum level, or having a certain type of Pokémon in your party. The end result is probably going to be that you will no longer be walking into a gym unless you're prepared to take it on. Given how toothless Pokémon games have already been over the last few years, even without such restrictions in place, such measures to tone down the difficulty even further are slightly worrying to say the least. No more breeding. Ask any veteran Pokémon fanatic what the most important mechanics to the larger Pokémon metagame are, and without a doubt, they'll mention breeding. It's a surprisingly deep and complex mechanic that's been in the series for ages, and one that countless competitive players make use of to literally craft their perfect Pokémon. In Pokémon Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee, they're not going to be able to do that, because there is no breeding in the game. No held items or abilities. Of course, Pokémon abilities often go hand in hand with breeding, but even those who do not engage with the breeding mechanic all too much can understand how important a Pokémon's ability, which can determine so much about your Pokémon's strengths and weaknesses, is. Abilities are also out. No more abilities. Well, what else is out? Held items. As a very, very basic example, you could have your Pokémon hold certain berries that they would automatically consume in battles for any number of effects, such as curing status ailments or recovering a certain amount of health. Well, no more. Not in Let's Go. Eevee training. Eevee training is yet another mechanic in Pokémon games that you can practically ignore entirely and not be affected by, but if you do get into it, you realize just how incredibly useful and important it can be. Veteran Pokémon fans utilize Eevee training to shape specific stats of their Pokémon, and on the competitive scene, Eevee training is one of the most important things in the entire series. However, EVs, or effort values, are changing quite significantly in Let's Go. Earlier, you used to get EVs corresponding to one of the stats from each Pokémon you beat. 4 of each EV added to +1 for that stat, so in the past EVs were gathered by battling Pokémon. Now, however, you EV train your Pokémon by feeding them candies, which you get from catching wild Pokémon. If you've never bothered with Eevee training, you probably won't care about any of this, but if you have, however, this won't sit well with you. That said, it does make it more streamlined in a way, and it puts the focus squarely on catching Pokemon instead of battling them, which seems to be in line with the game in general. Pokemon in the Overworld. Just as it was in Pokemon Yellow, where your Pikachu would always follow you around in the Overworld, your Pikachu or your Eevee in Pokemon Let's Go, depending on which version you're playing, won't stay inside their Pokeballs. Instead, they'll always be visible in the Overworld, sitting on your shoulders. Additionally, whichever Pokemon is at the top of your party will follow you around in the Overworld, similar to Heart Gold and Soul Silver. You can also ride certain Pokemon, which is reminiscent of Pokemon Sun and Moon. All original 151 Pokemon included. Being remakes, or reimaginings at the very least, of the original Pokemon Red and Blue, one of the most frequently asked questions about Let's Go has been, what Pokemon will it have? All original 151 Kanto Pokemon species will be included in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Additionally, Mega Evolutions of Kanto Pokemon from Pokemon X and Y, as well as from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire will also be included, while Alolan versions of Kanto Pokemon as seen in Pokemon Sun and Moon will also be featured. Players can transfer Kanto Pokemon that they catch in Pokemon Go to Pokemon Let's Go. Master Trainers. Post-game is quite important in every Pokemon game, and this is one area where Let's Go won't be holding back. Master Trainers will serve as the bulk of Let's Go's post-game activities. There are 151 Master Trainers in the game in total, one for each variety of Kanto's Pokemon. Each trainer will be the ultimate trainer of their corresponding Pokemon. So for example, you'll train with your Pikachu and then take it to the Pikachu Master Trainer, and if you beat that trainer, you'll receive the Pikachu title. Beat all 151 to become the ultimate Pokemon Master. So now, not only do you have to catch them all, you also have to beat them all, which, frankly, is quite an exciting prospect. Meltan. Pokemon Let's Go might be focusing on the original 151 Pokemon from Kanto, but that doesn't mean there isn't going to be anything new to see. Meltan, a brand new Pokemon from the yet-to-come 8th generation, is also going to be included in the game. The Steel-type mythical Pokemon Meltan first debuted in Pokemon Go, but for those unfamiliar with or uncaring about the series' foray into mobile gaming, this is going to be Meltan's proper introduction in a Pokemon RPG. Jesse and James. Any self-respecting Pokemon fan who's watched even a little bit of the anime is familiar with these two. Jesse and James, the Team Rocket duo that always seems to be blasting off again, have been a permanent fixture in the Pokemon anime for as long as it's existed. As remakes of the original games, Let's Go will once again have Team Rocket as its primary antagonistic organization, and this time Jesse and James are also going to be joining the party. Co-op. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee will also feature local co-op multiplayer options. At any time, a second player can join the game by shaking the second Joy-Con controller. Once a second player joins the game, trainer battles are no longer regular fights and instead turn into 2 versus 1 fights with each player controlling a Pokemon in the battle. During wild Pokemon encounters, each trainer can throw berries and Pokeballs at the wild Pokemon. Nintendo Online. Given the fact that things such as breeding, abilities, and Eevee training aren't going to be in Pokemon Let's Go, it really goes without saying that competitive battling isn't going to be as much of a focus. There will, however, still be online battling and trading for players to participate in. To do so, however, players will need to have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, which pretty much goes without saying for most online games on the Switch now. No cloud saves. Nintendo Switch Online subscriptions also let you back up your game's save data in the cloud, but Nintendo has made the decision that, for certain games, this feature won't be enabled. One of those games is Pokemon Let's Go. Why? Well, because if you trade your Pokemon and have a cloud backup of a save where that Pokemon was still with you, you could always recover that save file and essentially cheat your way into having a full Pokédex. This is essentially the same reason why mainline Pokemon games only allow 1 save per cartridge, so it makes at least a little bit of sense. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily. Also, don't forget to switch on the bell notification icon, that way you don't miss out on any of our videos.